Okay, good morning, everybody, or good evening, or whatever time it is, wherever you are. Welcome to this, which is the webinar. I think this is the ninth safe wards intervention that we're so far covering. This will run as usual. I'm going to go into the detail of this particular intervention, the Know Each Other intervention, describe what it is, try and describe what it isn't, look into why it's there, why it's part of safe wards, what it's supposed to do and what it's supposed to accomplish. And we'll talk about the difficulties and the issues and adaptations to different types of psychiatric wards. And you're welcome to join in or pass comment or raise questions at any time. All you have to do is raise your hand. If you find your raise your hand button, push that and I will notice that and I'll stop presenting and talking and I'll then open your mic and you can speak to everybody who's here. So you should at the moment be seeing my screen with the Safe Wards logo and Know Each Other webinar on there. Can somebody stick their hand up? And if that's not the case, you should all be seeing my screen with the Safe Wards logo on it. In fact, I can see that it feels like at the moment I'm talking to nobody nowhere because I can't hear any of you. So will you all stick your hands up anyway and say that you can hear me? Ah, brilliant. Look, everybody's putting their hand up. So without any more fuss, I will get started. Know Each Other is my two favourite Know Each Other photographs. You've got one nurse there. I think that's maybe from it's from Keats Ward in Manchester holding their Know Each Other folder. And on the left-hand side, you've got the Know Each Other entry from the ward manager, I think from one of the pilot studies when we were developing the Safe Wards interventions and doing the early tests of them. So what is Know Each Other? Know Each Other is intended to be a folder which contains basic, ordinary, non-challenging information about the individual members of staff who work on the ward and the patients who are there. Basic things of interest like what sort of music they like, what their favourite soap opera is, what their favourite film is, what they like to do, those sorts of things. That's then summarised onto a piece of paper. You see here an A4 piece of paper with pictures if desired. And that is then laminated, placed in the folder or placed on display so that it's open to everybody. The intention is that the folder should stay out in the day room of the ward so that patients can look at each other's information and look at information about the staff. Staff can look at ordinary everyday information about the patients. And this will thereby facilitate ordinary, everyday human being to human being conversations between staff and patients and between patients and patients. So the whole, I suppose one of the fundamental ideas behind doing this, why it's part of the Safe Wards interventions, is that it's about nurturing equality between staff and patients. It's about turning the individual patients into human beings rather than patients, into human beings rather than constellations of symptoms. And I suppose it's about turning the nurses from symbols of authority and professionals in the eyes of the patients into ordinary human beings, equal human beings with common interests, common things to talk about, and nurturing good relationships between the two. It's also about increasing the rate of friendly, normal social interaction between people. That could be seen as therapeutic, but it also means that sort of conversation provides a good basis for knowing what patients are thinking and feeling. It opens up channels of communication, which means that they're more likely to talk to us about other things that are preoccupying them. And it just generally changes the atmosphere on the ward from a formal hospital environment into a more social environment. So it's to facilitate those staff-patient relationships, and of course we draw on those relationships when we get into tight and more difficult situations. It means we've got something to trade upon. It means the ways in which we will talk to each other, so it's the ways in which nurses will talk to patients during flashpoint situations, but also the ways that patients will talk to nurses during those periods of stress will be different because of the history of ordinary relationship, ordinary interaction, and common knowledge about each other. And then finally, you can see as I've typed on this slide here with the deliberate misspelling of social, it's to increase the number and strength of patient social interaction, and therefore increase the opportunities for mutual social support between patients. And you can see here there's a common connection to the mutual help meeting and to ideas about facilitating, easing relationships and interactions between patients so that flashpoints are less likely to happen, or if flashpoints do happen, there is a kind of a mutual society of support and tolerance for each other that will mean that they won't develop into a conflict event and then ultimately into a use of containment. At this point, I'm just going to pause and see whether anybody wants to make any contributions about what they have noticed about know each other as it goes into operation in relation to what it actually beneficially does. Stick your hand up if you want to talk. I see that my audience is in entirely passive mode. And there's no social interaction ongoing here, so I shall carry on talking. Know each other fidelity, what know each other is. So know each other is patients and staff sharing personal information with each other to facilitate ordinary conversations, equality and mutual respect. So the creation of a space where staff and patients can show their common humanness. What it isn't is one-way stuff. So it isn't staff sharing personal information with staff. What we have seen in a number of places is that this intervention gets that far and then it stops. So the staff will provide information about themselves, and this information will be either placed in a folder or placed on a notice board and remarked upon by other staff, and staff will think it's marvellous to discover things about each other that they didn't know before. But then that never completely comes through into changing interactions with patients. So that's one thing we see. The other thing we see is the one-way giving of staff information to patients that kind of accentuates the power differences. If there's no giving of information from patients to staff, then it's all a kind of a one-way channel of communication. Even though it's giving something of our own away to patients, which is nice, it's still unbalanced and it's still not valuing the comparable information that patients have to give us. So unless we make some effort to involve patients in this, in the sharing of information as well, it remains an asymmetric relationship. And it's not a way, we've kind of already covered this really, it's not a way of staff showing who they are to each other in front of the patients, and neither is it just an enhanced staff team notice board. That's about, if you just enhance your notice board with some extra information, it's a step forward, but it's not really what we mean by the know each other intervention. The know each other, the each other in there is not just each other as staff, it's the each other as staff and patients. It's patient to patient as well. So if you want the full benefit of this intervention, you have to carry it through the whole way. I know there are difficulties in doing that, and we'll carry on to talk about those in a moment. So what are the difficulties and issues with this particular intervention? Well, the one that we all meet very, very commonly is the staff refusing to share any information at all with the patients on the grounds of security. So they say, we're professionals, we don't give any information about ourselves to patients. And sometimes you meet an utter and complete blank wall on this score. Now, we work with quite a few wards, obviously, during the trial, and people do generally come round in time, just as long as some members of the team are prepared to take the first steps and share a little bit of information. So I think partly this is about waiting it out and giving people a chance to get started. And as people see others do it, and others do it quite safely and productively and rewardingly, then they're more likely to get involved themselves. But I think the other ingredient here is challenge. I think people need to be challenged as to exactly what they think the security risk is of sharing the type of information which is put in the Know Each Other folder. As I frequently say at conferences these days, I'm not entirely sure how it is that the patient is going to hit me with my musical preference. And there is nothing, or there should be nothing, in the Know Each Other information which is provided that would constitute any risk to anybody. We often have discussions here in the team, have had discussions here in the team about what it actually signifies when you meet a team or go to a ward where none of the staff are willing to share any information with the patients. And it's almost like that's a kind of a marker. It signifies something about the nature of the relationships, the very, very hierarchical nature of relationships, and the separation between and division between staff and patients on those particular wards. And in wards where everybody says that all together, it does take you back a little bit. I mean, it's not the sort of ward that I've ever worked on, so it really makes you pause to reflect and think about what other things might be going on in terms of relationships between staff and patients on those wards. I know probably some of you out there have had this experience as well, so I'm going to invite some comment at this stage. Stick your hand up if you want to say something. Are you all still there and hearing me? There you go, Jeff. You have the floor.
Just to say, yes, we are hearing you loud and clear now. Yeah, it's a real stymier, and I think it's one of the things about Know Each Other is I'm wondering if it actually I wonder if staff find it quite confrontational in that respect, because I'm just thinking there's really nowhere to hide. If somebody says, "Oh, I want you to do this," and you know, it's almost like a deal breaker, isn't it? I do wonder if part of that reluctance from staff is some kind of misconstrued. I'm just thinking about my own training of professional boundaries. I know we've had this discussion on the forum and everything else, and I'm not sure we ever came to any safe conclusion. But I think for me, you know, we should really be challenging even that. Well, professional boundaries doesn't mean to say that we are this faceless, non-human, you know, slab of nurse, but there's nothing beyond it really. I'm surprised people haven't commented, because we have heard this a lot, that resistance is out there, and I think it's fair to say that we find it in most places, rather than, it's not a rare occurrence. It's a fairly frequent occurrence. That's me done.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Fiona, I'm going to unmute you because I have heard you've got a lot to say about safe wards. So what have you got to say about Know Each Other and staff who don't want to share anything? You've got the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. This is actually my baby, this one, and I'm the champion for this in my work area. It's one that I've had some difficulty initially implementing with the reluctance, and what I found is when I challenge staff on that reluctance, I say, well, if a patient came and asked you a question, would you not answer it? Yeah, a general question, to which they say, well, of course I would. I said, well, what's the difference? So how I've implemented this intervention is more on a one-on-one basis, particularly working a night shift. We'd sit down and we'd do the form together, talk about it, and in the folder it goes. What is interesting is some of the feedback I've had from patients about that, including my own, and the embarrassing thing that I like neighbours. That it certainly opened up that dialogue between us, and that relationship was built straight away. So yeah, initially some reluctance, but I think our staff are turning around now, and I'd probably have 80% of the staff who have completed it now. We haven't implemented patients yet. That's my next challenge, I guess, is to get that going.
Yeah, I think before we move on to discussing the patients, I thought that was a particularly interesting comment you made, that if you actually ask people what they would say in conversation, there's less of a challenge there. Which makes me feel a lot better about all of those wards we've been to where people have said they don't share any personal information with patients, and they're not going to do the know each other intervention because it's unprofessional, because it suggests that they might actually be sharing that information. It's just the formality, it's just the putting it down on paper that seems a little bit challenging for them. Yeah, go ahead, Fiona, go on.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm in an aged unit too, so I'm not sure whether there's more reluctance in an adult unit. And here in Bendigo, I think our aged and secure are more advanced in this intervention than the adult unit, and that's possibly a bit easier in age. I don't know. That's just a thought. But I just make it quite clear I'm not going to ask you to put down anything, that you go to a certain park at 6 o'clock at night, or, there's nothing there that can cause you any harm.
Yeah. Yeah, and there really isn't. I'm just going to mute you now, Fiona, and see if anybody else wants to have a word. Anybody else want to say anything about this issue? Because it's the most common thing that comes up with know each other. No, nobody else is sticking their hands up. Let's carry on and talk about the failure to carry through to patient information. This is the next thing that crops up most commonly. People they do their own, they get the staff stuff done and put it in a folder, but they're not able somehow to manage to carry that through into patient information. I think part of the difficulties here on acute units is, of course, you've got a continual throughput of patients. And then there is the difficulty of securing accurate and reasonably objective and truthful information about patients' interests and activities at the point at which they're admitted, because obviously people are pretty ill when they turn up on an acute inpatient psychiatric ward. They can be exceedingly high, for example, and they might say all kinds of stuff about themselves, semi-delusional or grandiose stuff, that you wouldn't want to put down on any record sheet, because it might at a later point embarrass them for having said that to everybody, to the whole audience of the ward, if you like. So I think that might be part of the difficulty about negotiating that. Then there's the continual throughput of such people, so you would need to catch them at the moment that they started to become well enough to be able to interact. So it was not necessarily right at the beginning of their stay. But of course, by that time, you're planning for discharge and you've got new people coming into the ward. So I think there are very real difficulties in getting the patient information on there in a situation in which you've got a continuous throughput of people who are arriving in a significantly ill, potentially delusional, hallucinating, grandiose, behaviorally disturbed state, and then slowly getting better, and picking the moment at which to acquire the information before that can then be transmitted to the ward community so that people have got stuff to talk about which is relatively normal, if you like. So I think that there are some real challenges there in terms of organisation. But those of us who worked on acute psychiatric wards know that you repeatedly get the same people through and through and through over a long period of time. And if we accumulate these know each other information sheets, or perhaps put them together with the help of relatives and others who know the patient, might even be their community psychiatric nurse who's able to help us complete the know each other information that we could share, then we ought to have that kind of on file eventually so that we can bring that out on repeated admissions. In fact, if we're having somebody admitted who's completely disturbed, but who we already know as a human being and a person, we ought to be able to make a stab at least writing three things down on a piece of paper about that person. So I'm talking here, I'm beginning to realize that actually then that becomes problematic in terms of consent, doesn't it? Because we might know things about that patient. We might know that they like to watch Neighbours, and that we've talked to them about Neighbours on a previous admission. But to actually share that information on their behalf at the point of admission when they're in a disturbed and not fully aware or not fully having the capacity moment, if you like, in their inpatient stay, that might be quite uncomfortable to share that on their behalf. So there are real blocks and challenges to working through and trying to find a way of making this work. And the busier your acute psychiatric ward is, the higher the throughput of patients, the more challenging it's going to be. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, it just means that it's difficult and we have to work with it and make it happen. I'm going to invite some end comments on that. Anybody want to speak about patient information? I'm obviously giving a perfect presentation which is covering all of the bases, which is brilliant. Okay, the next thing that we saw repeatedly, this happened during the pilot study. I remember our research assistant coming back to the team and complaining of this. Whenever we visited the ward, the Know Each Other folder was always in the office. It was never out in the day room where the patients could access it. So the staff were reading about each other and were reading about the patients, but the patient access to the information was limited because staff would take it away and read it in the office. I'm not too sure. In one sense, that's a testament to how interesting the contents of the Know Each Other folder are to the staff, which is great. On the other hand, it means that the actual force of the intervention is being diluted by restraining, if you like, or keeping the lid on the degree to which the information is accessible to the patients out on the ward. I haven't got anything specific other than that to say about that. The last challenge is kind of, I suppose, what we've just talked about in terms of patient information, but it also relates to staff information. You have to keep it up to date, and it has to look good. A tatty folder with worn out stuff in it is clearly not going to create the same impression to patients as will a really good looking folder which is personalized, in which the information is fresh, a folder that only has information about people who are actually on the ward or people who are actually working on the ward. So like everything else, if you want this to actually function, you want it to functionally well, it's got to be maintained. It's got to look good. It's got to look as if we, the staff team, value this as an intervention and as an information sharing exercise. Is there any difficulty or issue with Know Each Other that I have not covered in this slide? There you go, Fiona. You have the floor again.
Thanks, Len. Just something else I wanted to bring up. It wasn't a difficulty, well, it was one way to overcome a difficulty, was to get senior people in our organisation to comply with this. So we asked members of Psych Exec to actually complete the template, which we have in our folder on our ward, even though they don't have a presence on our ward. But it was, by doing that, we thought we'd have more success in getting other staff members to participate, and I have to say that I think that has worked. So, you know, if our senior people can do it, then staff on the ward can do it.
Yeah, I suppose that was our motivation as researchers as well. We completed all Know Each Other cards, and I think they're probably still on the website. You can probably still download those. I think my musical preference might have changed since doing that. But it was, again, part of demonstrating that this is not problematic information.
Absolutely.
In reality. Yeah. As you're working in aged care, Fiona, do you have anything to comment about difficulties in relation to care of the elderly and this intervention?
Not really. I guess when you're talking about transferring it in regards to the patient information, I've been giving that a lot of thought, and that's where we feel that we're going to use the carers to help in that implementing it, and certainly getting the consent is something that I have been thinking about, and even to the point where just having I consent to this information being displayed on the back of the form, that we can demonstrate that we have obtained that consent. But yeah, very much so is including the carers and family in doing this. Our mental health patients, I did speak about it at one of our meetings, and they're pretty keen. The few that were there that particular day, they're pretty keen, and I think once we get it rolling, the participation will be good. Yes, I understand on admission might be a little difficult, but as you said, we know our patients that come back, so there will be times when that can be done on admission, and the plan is to have it in our admission pack and part of that process, but bearing in mind if it's not applicable or appropriate at that time to readdress it soon after. But that's all, I guess, from an age perspective.
Yeah, we've had a number of wards who do stuff called life story work, where they generate a patient story of their life between them, the patient, and their carer. Have we got a dog there?
Yes, I have got a dog there.
That's the first time we've had a dog at our webinar. Yeah, they do life story work with the elderly, and they're drawing on that for the kind of the Know Each Other information. I don't know if that helps at all. I see that Jeff's got his hand up here, so I'm gonna open up Jeff's mic. There you go, Jeff. You have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. That was good from Fiona, actually. And I was thinking there's other stuff like This Is Me, which we can all perhaps have a look at, some of the older adult stuff, because it's very interesting how they do go about getting people's stories. You asked if there was any other issues, and it was just one. It's a minor thing, Len, but it came up a couple of times, and that's the use of photographs in some of the places where staff have done really good Know Each Other's. They've all used photographs of themselves, and I think that's fine. But you just need to be a little bit careful, I think, in the actual design of it, that it's because patients might think, oh, do I have to have my photograph taken? And I think it's good to mix up the design so that it doesn't look like it's like a staff employee sheet. I think you do have to be a little bit careful in some of the adaptions from the template that we put on the website, that it doesn't move into that staff to staff kind of template. So I just saying that.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody else is using photographs or not, but just to be careful about that.
Yeah, didn't we use icons or symbols and stuff that people chose They could
Yeah,
choose a flower or,
yeah.
rather than a photograph of themselves to get round the whole issues that will go around about photographs, because staff can clearly consent to enable their photograph to be public, if you like, and it's
Yeah,
commonly on notice boards anyway. But there are a whole
yeah,
set of new issues when it comes to patients.
yeah. If we actually look on the website on ours, yours has got a photograph, but others have got icons. I think mine's blank, but basically it's just be a little bit careful about the template itself, and you're not putting a block in there unwittingly. And I think the staff that did that, they did it for good reasons. But we were just saying, well, be careful, because patients might think, oh God, I've got to have my photograph taken. Or it's very clear if all the staff have photographed and none of the patients do, that there's a difference.
Okay, very good. I'm going to move on now. Are there any problems with long-term implementation of Know Each Other? I don't think there are. It's unproblematic to continue long-term so long as the newly starting staff contribute and the folders are maintained. Continuous input of new patients, just as long as you've got turnover, of course, and there might be issues with longer staying wards where the folder doesn't go out of date, but people know all of the contents of it. I should imagine on a forensic ward this might be an issue, or long stay rehab and stuff like that. The turnover's slow, so the renewal of information in the folder is not very frequent, and so people stop looking at it. In fact, it becomes just another thing hanging about the ward. So I'm not too sure what you would do about that. Maybe there would be an issue about taking it, bringing it in and taking it away for a while, doing it for 3 months out of every year or 6 months out of every year. I don't know. That's just finding a way of making sure it's new each time you bring it out, or asking people for different information, to change their information or transform their presentation in some way at different stages. If I was an occupational therapist or an art therapist, I'd get people to draw a picture representing themselves and put that in the Know Each Other folder for 1 month. So then people can explain their pictures to each other. Anyway, if you can think about creative ways of renewing this, and there you go. On there, I've got, if it becomes routinized for the staff, they should be asked to contribute a new information sheet containing facts not previously shared. Loads of us have got loads of trivia about our life that we could share on these Know Each Other sheets without them representing any kind of security risk whatsoever. There you go. Adjustments to specific client groups. We've already talked about older people, and we've got mentioning on the slide here, relatives and carers might be needed as sources for patients and linked to life story work. Forensic, I think we need certainly to be careful of protecting staff and protecting patients from one another. And you would want to keep a careful eye on and perhaps have some vetting process before making the information on the Know Each Other sheet public. I'm just a little bit cautious in terms of the greater capacity for some form of exploitation or for some form of ill-judged sharing, either by a member of staff or by a patient in that particular setting. And of course, the higher secure the forensic setting, the more care you would want to exercise. For CAMs, I don't think there's any adjustments required, but obviously the type of information that staff share has to be something that's age interesting to the client group. So the sort of stuff that might interest children and adolescents about the staff members might be a little bit different from what would interest fellow adults. Just worth a little bit of thought. We have reached the end. So that's the end of this presentation. It's a blissfully brief intervention, the Know Each Other intervention. Would anybody like to have any final words or contributions? We have two people at the webinar who haven't spoke yet, so I'm going to invite them to contribute, and I will start with Carly. Carly, your mic is open. What would you like to say about Know Each Other?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Actually, I'm joining you from Ontario, Canada. We're actually just starting the implementation process. We'll be starting in about a month. So I really just came on to see what everyone had to share. So I don't really have much. We are a forensic unit. So your words about forensics are making notes, that's for sure.
Okay, Carly, that's great. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll get to see you when I come round in Canada during October. Kim, you're the other person who hasn't said anything yet, and the floor's yours now. What do you want to say?
Oh, that's me, Kim.
Yeah, that's you, Kim.
Hi. So I am also in Ontario, in Windsor, Ontario. And so we are about to implement it also in September. And so this was for me just to hear what's been going on. And I'm hoping that you go back and start doing, redo some of the 1 to 8 interventions so that we can help. We'll learn from that because there's quite a few hospitals, I guess, in Ontario that are going to go live in September. So this was a very good opportunity to hear others speak.
Okay, nice to chat with you, and thanks for joining in, Kim. I should say that all of these webinars are recorded, including this one. The recording's running at the moment, and they're all available on YouTube. So I'll be posting this one on YouTube pretty much as soon as we've finished, and within a couple of hours it will be available. So all of the past recordings of all of the past webinars are all there. Okay, Jeff, you want to have a word? There you go. Floor's yours, Jeff.
Just a comment on Victoria and Ontario, two hotbeds of safe words implementation. Actually, just it's interesting that the attendees are from. Hello to the people in Ontario, because we've had lots of interest on Facebook, and I think Cambridge Memorial Hospital, Northeast. I don't even know where the place is in Ontario, but I'm learning very fast. So it's a very, very big welcome to you, and of course Victoria, which is roaring ahead with the evaluation. I don't know if you're involved with that, Fiona. So it's very nice to have you here at the webinar.
Now, I do believe that Fiona Hutchins is the secret identity of somebody. Is this true, Fiona Hutchins?
Oh no, have you caught me out? Yes, I am Captain Captain Safewards.
Yeah, Fiona is Captain Safewards, and if anybody wants to follow up on that, there are photographs.
That's embarrassing.
There are photographs on Facebook. I think that was a brilliant intervention, Fiona. I absolutely love you for doing that.
2 bottles of wine, 3 staff members, and a short little skit. We mastered it.
Brilliant. Brilliant, and congratulations, and great to have you at a webinar. With that, I'm going to bring this webinar to an end. Thank you all very much for attending. Look forward to meeting you at the next one. Bye for now.